He was watching her on the cameras, just like he watched everyone. Mr. Arthur Hayes, a very rich man, had cameras everywhere in his huge mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. He watched for her to steal something, to tell a lie, or to just leave, like all the other people who had tried to help his family. But what he saw that night, on the little screen, stopped his heart from beating properly. She was kneeling on the floor, right between his two sons, doing something he thought was completely impossible. And when Arthur finally understood what it all meant, his special coffee mug slipped from his hands. It hit the polished marble floor with a loud smash, breaking into many pieces. Arthur didn't even care about the mess. He fell to his own knees because everything he thought he knew about this new helper, a woman named Emily Davis, was completely wrong. Arthur Hayes's house used to be full of life, full of happy sounds. Now it was just full of silence. Not the nice, peaceful kind of quiet you get when everyone is sleeping. No, this was a heavy, thick silence, like something sad had happened and never really left. It felt like a big, invisible blanket of quiet covered everything. His twin boys, Leo and Noah, used to make so much noise. They were always running through these big rooms, laughing loudly, bumping into the fancy furniture, and sometimes even crashing into each other. Their giggles and shouts echoed everywhere. But that was a long time ago. That was before the terrible car accident, before their wonderful mother, Sarah, died. And it was before they came home from the hospital in wheelchairs, unable to walk. Now Leo and Noah were 6 years old. They barely talked, and they hardly ever looked up from their laps. Their bright eyes, which used to sparkle with mischief, now seemed dim and sad. Arthur had tried everything he could think of to help them. He hired the very best doctors from all over the country, bought the most amazing, expensive medical equipment. He even had special teachers and therapists come to the house. But nothing seemed to work. His boys stayed quiet, sad, and still couldn't walk. So, Arthur did the only thing he knew how to do when he felt helpless. He built walls around his heart and around his home. He had high, strong fences installed, and he put in an incredible number of cameras, 26 of them. There was a camera in every hallway, in every corner, pointing at every door. He wanted to see everything, all the time. Why so many cameras? Because in the past 3 years, 7 different people had walked through that front door, promising to help his boys. And every single one of those 7 people had let him down, or worse, betrayed him. One helper, a lady who seemed very kind at first, secretly sold pictures of his sad sons to a newspaper. Arthur was furious when he saw the photos splashed across the front page, showing his boys looking lost and frail. Another person stole some of the special medicines the boys needed. And one terrible helper just disappeared in the middle of the night, taking all of Leo and Noah's special therapy schedules with her. Arthur had to start all over again, finding new doctors and making new plans. Trust wasn't something Arthur gave away easily anymore. It was something people had to earn, and no one had earned it. In fact, it felt like people only took advantage of him and his family. So, when Emily Davis showed up at his mansion that morning in April, she was just another person to watch. She carried one small, neat suitcase and was very quiet, almost too calm. Arthur didn't ask her many questions. He just handed her a long contract with lots of rules and told her to sign it. In his mind, she was just another risk. Another person he would have to watch very, very carefully, waiting for her to make a mistake. And watch her he did. Through the cameras, every single day, every single night. He looked for the lie, the moment she would slip up and show her true, bad intentions. He waited for her to steal, to sneak, to be mean to his boys when she thought no one was looking. But 2 weeks later something happened. Something he truly didn't expect at all. It was late at night. His sons, Leo and Noah, woke up crying. Their cries were soft at first, then grew louder, echoing in the quiet house. Emily, who slept in a room near theirs, quickly went to them. Arthur stood frozen in the hallway, listening through a special monitor he kept in his hand. He heard Emily's soft voice, singing a lullaby to soothe the boys back to sleep. A lullaby. It was the exact same song his wife, Sarah, used to sing to the boys when they were babies. The very same song that almost no one else knew. Arthur's hands, holding the monitor, went cold. How could Emily possibly know that song? It was a private, special song. He waited until she had left the boys' room and gone back to her own. Then, carefully, quietly, he went into her small apartment-like living space in the mansion. He searched through her things. He didn't find much, because she had so few belongings. But in the top drawer of a small bedside table, he found a photograph. It was lying face down, as if hidden. When he carefully turned it over, his whole world stopped. It was like time itself froze. But before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because if you've ever wondered whether God really sends people into your life exactly when you need them, this story will give you your answer. The photograph showed a younger Emily, wearing a paramedic uniform. She was kneeling on a dark stretch of highway, next to an overturned car. Emergency lights, bright red and blue, flashed in the background, making the scene look urgent and scary. Her face in the picture looked very tired, and there were dark stains on her uniform that looked like blood. Arthur's hands began to shake uncontrollably as he carefully turned the photo over again. On the back, in neat, careful handwriting, were a few words. September 17, 2022. I-95 North. The night everything changed. Rachel's last words, find my boys. Promise me. Arthur sat down hard on the edge of Emily's bed. He felt dizzy. September 17, 2022. That was the exact night of the terrible car accident. The night his beloved wife, Sarah, had died. The night Mason and Henry, his strong, playful boys, had stopped walking forever. Emily had been there. She wasn't just some random caregiver his security team had found in an online search. She was the brave paramedic who had responded to the terrible crash. She was the one who had carefully pulled his sons from the tangled, broken wreckage of the car. And she was the one his dying wife, Sarah, had spoken to in her final moments. Sarah had asked Emily to find their boys. Arthur's chest tightened. It felt like a giant, invisible hand was squeezing his heart. His breath came out in short, shallow gasps. He pressed his palms hard against his eyes, trying to make sense of this shocking discovery. Why hadn't she told him? Why would she walk into his house, sign a strict contract, and pretend to be a complete stranger? When she had been there, right there, on the night his entire world had been shattered into a million pieces? His phone was suddenly in his hand, almost before he realized he had picked it up. He opened the internet browser on the phone. He quickly typed in, Connecticut State Police. September 17, 2022, I-95 North accident. News articles immediately filled the screen. He had read them all before, hundreds of times, in the sad, blurry months after the accident. He had searched for every tiny detail, every possible answer, for anything that could explain why Sarah had to die. But now, he was looking for something completely different. He scrolled down, clicked on links, and read faster and faster. First responders arrived within minutes. 2 children bravely extracted from vehicle. Mother tragically pronounced dead at scene. Then he found it. A smaller article, from a local Connecticut news website. There was a photo at the bottom of the article. It showed a group of paramedics standing beside an ambulance. There were 3 of them. And there, on the left side of the picture, was Emily. She looked younger, yes, but it was definitely her. She looked utterly exhausted, staring at the camera with eyes that seemed to have seen something no one should ever have to see. The caption under the photo read, Paramedic Emily Davis, who assisted in the rescue, was later hospitalized after complications related to the incident. Hospitalized? Arthur's stomach dropped. He felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. He clicked again. He searched deeper, typing new words into the search bar. Hospital records weren't usually public, but incident reports from emergency services often were. He found the log. E. Davis, admitted St. Andrew's Hospital, 11:52 p.m. Emergency obstetrics, premature labor, 24 weeks. The room seemed to tilt around him. She had been pregnant. And something terrible had happened that night. Something bad enough to send her to the hospital immediately after she had saved his sons. Arthur stood up, the photograph still clutched tightly in his hand. His mind was racing, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. Emily had lost something incredibly precious that night, too. And now, here she was, living in his house, carefully caring for his boys, singing the special lullabies his dead wife used to sing. Down the hall, he heard her soft footsteps. She was coming back from the kitchen, probably getting a glass of water. He had only seconds to make a decision. Should he confront her right now, demand the truth, shouting his questions? Or should he keep watching, keep digging, try to find out what else she wasn't telling him? Because if she had hidden something this big, this important, what else could she be hiding? Arthur carefully put the photograph back exactly where he had found it. He closed the drawer, making sure it looked untouched. He left her room quickly, silently, before she came back down the hall. He couldn't confront her. Not yet. Not until he knew exactly what he was dealing with, what her full story was. That night, Arthur sat in his private office, the many monitors glowing with live feeds from all the cameras in front of him. But he wasn't looking for lies anymore. He was desperately looking for answers. He clicked on camera 7, which showed the boys' playroom. Emily was on the floor, gently helping Leo with his physical therapy exercises. They were simple movements, lifting his arms, reaching for soft, colorful blocks, trying to strengthen the tiny muscles that still worked in his arms and hands. The doctors had said these exercises were very important to keep Leo's muscles from getting weaker. Arthur paid a lot of money for these special therapies. But watching his son struggle always felt like watching him lose all over again. Leo's small hand trembled as he reached for a block. It slipped from his fingers and rolled away. "That's okay," Emily said softly, her voice full of kindness. "Try again. You're doing great, Leo." Leo tried again. And again, he failed. His little face crumpled, tears starting to form in his eyes. He was so frustrated. "Hey," she whispered, leaning closer to him. "Your mama would be so proud of how hard you're trying right now. You know that?" Arthur, watching through the monitor, froze. Leo looked up at Emily. He really looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise and curiosity. "You knew my mama?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily's face didn't change much. But Arthur, watching every little movement on the screen, saw it. Just for a second, something sad and broken flashed in her eyes. It was gone almost immediately. "I met her once," Emily said quietly, her voice a little shaky. "A long time ago. And she told me you were the bravest boy she had ever known." Leo's lip quivered. "She said that?" "She did," Emily confirmed gently. Noah, who was sitting in his wheelchair nearby, looking out the window, suddenly spoke. It was the first time he had spoken in days. "What else did she say?" Emily smiled, a gentle, sad smile. "She said she loved you both more than the whole wide world. And that no matter what happened, she would always be watching over you, like a guardian angel." Arthur's throat burned. He felt a lump in his chest. On the screen, Leo reached for the block again. This time, with a great effort, he held it. He clutched it tight in his small hand. "Look," he whispered, his voice full of wonder and a tiny bit of pride. "I did it." "You did," Emily said, her face beaming. And Arthur, watching her face, saw that she truly believed in him, truly celebrated his small victory. Arthur turned off the monitor. He stood up and walked to the big window in his office, looking out at the sparkling city lights of Greenwich. She'd been there. In Sarah's final moments, she had heard his wife's last words. She had made a sacred promise. And now, she was here, speaking to his sons as if she carried pieces of their mother's love with her. But why all the secrecy? Why not tell him from the very beginning? Unless there was more. Something darker. Something she couldn't possibly say. His phone buzzed. A text message. It was from his private investigator, A man named Mr. Jenkins. Found hospital records. Emily Davis admitted same night as your wife. Obstetrics emergency. Baby didn't survive. Thought you should know. Arthur's legs suddenly gave out. He sat down hard in his office chair, staring at the message. She had lost a child. Her own baby. The very night she had saved his sons. And she still came back. She still found them. She still kept her promise. The question wasn't why she had hidden it anymore. The question was how much had she sacrificed to be here, to keep that promise? The next morning, Arthur hadn't slept a wink. He sat with those hospital records spread all across his giant desk until the sun finally broke through the large windows, painting the sky with soft pink and orange colors. The report read, Samantha Brown, admitted 11:52 p.m., premature labor induced by trauma, infant deceased at 24 weeks. She had been 6 months pregnant. And whatever terrible thing happened that night, the crash, the chaotic rescue, the sheer terror, it had taken her baby away from her. Arthur pushed the papers away from him. He rubbed his face with both hands, feeling exhausted and completely overwhelmed. She had saved his sons, and she had lost her own child in the process. And now she was here, in his home, caring for Leo and Noah as if they were her very own. He should fire her. The fact that she had kept such a huge secret from him was reason enough. It was a breach of trust. But something stopped him. Something he couldn't quite name yet. A feeling deep inside him, telling him to wait. Downstairs, he heard her voice again, soft and patient. He pulled up the monitor on his desk. Camera 7 again. Emily was sitting on the floor with the twins. This time, she wasn't forcing them to do therapy. She was just sitting with them, peacefully. A colorful picture book was open in her lap. This one's about a little bird who lost his way home, she said gently, her voice warm and soothing. But he kept flying, kept looking, and you know what? He found it. Noah leaned forward slightly in his wheelchair. It was just an inch, but for Noah, it was a big movement. Did he cry? Noah asked, his voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Emily said, nodding. He cried a lot because being lost is scary. But crying didn't make him weak. It made him honest. Leo, always a bit quieter than his brother, whispered, Do you think Mama cried? The question hung in the air, heavy and full of sadness. Arthur's chest tightened again. He leaned closer to the screen, desperate to hear Emily's answer. Emily gently set the book down. She looked at Leo with eyes so full of tenderness and understanding that it almost hurt Arthur to watch. I think she did, Emily said softly. I think she cried because she didn't want to leave you. But I also think she knew you'd be okay. Because you're stronger than you know. Leo's face crumpled. But I'm not strong. I can't even walk. Strong isn't about walking, Emily whispered, reaching out to gently touch his arm. It's about waking up every day, even when you're sad. It's about trying, even when it's hard. And you do that, Leo. Every single day. Noah, watching his brother, reached over and took Leo's hand. And then something happened that Arthur hadn't seen in over a year. Leo smiled. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was real. It reached his eyes. Arthur's hand covered his mouth. He felt a gasp escape. Emily pulled both boys close to her, holding them gently. And Arthur saw her shoulders shake just once, very slightly, as if she was trying very hard to hold back her own tears. He turned off the monitor. He stood up, walked out of his office, and down the long hallway. He had to know. He had to ask her directly, face to face. But when he reached the playroom door and looked through the little window in it, he stopped. Because what he saw wasn't just a caregiver doing her job. It was a woman mourning with his sons, grieving alongside them, as if she understood their pain in ways he never could. And Arthur realized something truly terrifying. She wasn't here to replace Sarah, their mother. She was here because Sarah had sent her. Arthur didn't walk into the playroom that day. He turned around, went back to his office, and closed the door quietly. He needed time. He needed space. He needed to make sense of what he was feeling because the truth, the real truth, was starting to absolutely terrify him. Over the next 3 days, he watched her even more carefully than ever before. But he wasn't searching for deception or lies anymore. He was searching for proof that what he was seeing was real. Every morning, Emily woke up before the sun even thought about rising. He saw her through camera 4, in the huge, modern kitchen. She was making breakfast for the twins. Not the fancy meals the chef usually prepared, but her own simple, comforting food. Scrambled eggs, toast cut into fun shapes, fruit arranged like little suns on their plates. Small things, thoughtful things, the kind of things a mother would do. At night, after the twins were finally asleep, she often stayed in the playroom. He saw her folding their blankets neatly, organizing their toys, and sometimes she would sit by the window with her Bible open in her lap, her lips moving in silent prayer. Arthur zoomed the camera in once, close enough to see her face clearly. She was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears falling down her cheeks as she prayed. And Arthur wondered, was she praying for his sons, or for the child she had lost? One afternoon, Arthur's assistant brought him some financial records he had asked for. Bank statements, 3 years' worth, for Emily Davis. He scanned them slowly, his eyes moving quickly across the numbers. Emily's salary as a paramedic had been modest, not very high. After she left the ambulance service, she had worked 2 jobs, one at a children's medical clinic during the day, and another stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight. It seemed like she barely slept. And yet, every single month, without fail, there were transfers. Large amounts of money were sent to a special medical trust fund. Arthur traced the account number carefully. Then he called his lawyer. "Find out who this belongs to," he commanded. 2 hours later, his lawyer called back. "It's registered to your sons, Mr. Hayes. Someone's been secretly funding their therapy equipment for the past 2 years, completely anonymously." Arthur's hand tightened around the phone. "How much?" he asked, his voice rough. "Just over $47,000, sir." The room spun. $47,000. Nearly everything she had ever earned. All of it poured into helping 2 boys she had never even met yet. Arthur hung up the phone and sat in the sudden silence. She had been preparing. Saving every penny. Making sure Leo and Noah had what they needed long before she ever walked through his front door. This wasn't just a job to her. This was a mission. But why? Why sacrifice absolutely everything? Why give up her whole life, her savings, her time, for a promise made to a dying stranger? Unless Sarah had seen something in her. Something Arthur still couldn't see. Or maybe something he was too afraid to see. Down the hall he heard laughter. Real laughter. Leo's voice, high and bright, saying, "Do it again, Emily! Do the funny voice again!" Arthur stood up. He walked to the hallway, stopping just outside the playroom door. Through the window, he watched Emily make silly faces while reading to the twins. He watched his sons laugh, really laugh, for the first time since the accident. And Arthur knew. He couldn't let her stay. Not because she was lying, but because if she stayed much longer, his sons would fall deeply in love with her. And losing her, if she ever left or betrayed them like everyone else, would destroy them all over again. He couldn't bear the thought of them being hurt even more. Arthur found her in the kitchen that evening. The twins were already in bed, finally quiet. The huge house felt very silent. Emily was making herself a cup of tea. She didn't hear him come in. "You were there," he said, his voice flat. Emily's hand froze on the kettle. She turned slowly. Arthur stood in the doorway, the photograph of her at the accident scene clutched in his hand. Her eyes immediately dropped to the picture, and he saw everything in her face: recognition, fear, and a strange kind of relief, like she had been waiting for this moment to finally come. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "You pulled them out of the car." "I did." Arthur's voice shook slightly. "My wife, she spoke to you." Emily's eyes immediately filled with tears. She nodded slowly. "What did she say?" His throat burned. Tell me exactly what she said. Emily gently set the kettle down. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She was in the front seat, Mr. Hayes, very badly hurt. We knew. Her voice cracked, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. We knew she wasn't going to make it. But she was still conscious, still fighting with all her might. And when we finally got Leo and Noah out of the car, when I told her they were alive, she grabbed my wrist. Arthur's hands trembled, waiting. She looked at me. Emily continued, tears now streaming freely down her face. And she said, if I don't make it, promise me you'll find my boys. Love them the way I would have. Arthur's knees felt weak. He gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, needing to hold on. I promised her, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Right there. I promised. And your baby? Arthur's voice broke, catching in his throat. You lost your baby that night. Emily closed her eyes. A soft, heartbroken sob escaped her lips. The trauma, it triggered early labor. My daughter was born at the hospital while your sons were in surgery. She lived 20 minutes. I held her, and the whole time, all I could think was, at least I saved someone else's children. Arthur couldn't breathe. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Why hide it? Because I didn't come here for sympathy, Mr. Hayes. Her voice was steady despite the tears that still fell. I came because I made a promise to a dying mother. And your sons deserve someone who'd fight for them the way she would have. The money, Arthur said, remembering the financial records. The equipment, that was you. They needed it, she replied simply. You gave everything. They were worth it. A heavy, unbearable silence hung between them. Arthur looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who had sacrificed more than he could possibly comprehend. Someone who had kept a sacred promise when most people would have just walked away, too afraid or too hurt to continue. And it terrified him. Because his sons already loved her. And if she left, if she betrayed them like everyone else, they wouldn't survive it. He couldn't let them go through that pain again. I need you to go, he said, the words feeling cold and harsh, tearing from his own lips. Emily's face shattered. Her eyes, already red from tears, widened in disbelief and pain. Mr. Hayes. Pack your things. Arthur cut her off, his voice deliberately cold and controlled, trying to hide his own fear. I want you gone by morning. You came here under false pretenses. Arthur continued, making up an excuse. You had a personal connection to my family that you deliberately hid. I came here because your wife asked me to, she said, her voice rising slightly. My wife is dead. The words exploded out of him, full of his own pain and anger. And you? You've been using my sons to heal from your own loss. That's what this is. You lost your baby and now you're… Don't… Emily's voice cut through his words. It was quiet, but firm, stopping him dead in his tracks. But Arthur couldn't stop. Fear can make people cruel, and he was drowning in it, suffocating under the weight of his own terror of losing someone else he loved. You manipulated your way into our lives. Made yourself indispensable. And what happens when you leave, Emily? What happens when you get what you need from them and just walk away? I would never, she whispered, her voice full of hurt. Everyone leaves. His voice broke, ragged and desperate. From down the hall, a small voice called out. Emily? Both of them froze. It was Leo. He was awake, listening. Where's Emily going? Noah's voice joined his brother's, sounding scared. Emily's face crumpled completely. She started to move toward the hallway, toward the boys, but Arthur stepped directly in her path, blocking her way. Don't, he said, his voice firm. She looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was unbearable. But she turned toward the hall anyway, ignoring Arthur. She knelt down, even though she couldn't see the boys from where she was, but they could definitely hear her. I love you both so much, she said, her voice shaking badly. You remember that, okay? You're strong. You're brave. And your mama, she's so proud of you. Don't leave! Leo cried, his voice breaking. Please don't leave! Stay, Emily! Noah begged, his voice high and desperate. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Arthur stood frozen, watching his sons beg for someone to stay, watching the woman his wife had sent to them break apart right in front of him. And he said nothing. He couldn't. Emily finally stood up, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and looked at Arthur one last time. I kept my promise, she whispered, her voice filled with deep sadness. I hope someday you'll understand that. She walked past him, her head held high, and slowly climbed the grand staircase. 15 minutes later, she came back down, carrying her small suitcase, the exact same one she had arrived with. She didn't look at him as she walked to the front door. She opened it and stepped out into the night. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was utter devastation. Arthur stood in the entryway, completely alone, listening to his twins crying heartbrokenly down the hall. He had gotten what he thought he wanted: control, safety, protection from the risk of losing anyone else he cared about. But the house felt emptier than it ever had before. And somewhere deep in his chest, a small, quiet voice whispered, "What have you done?" The house felt utterly different after she left. It wasn't silent, no. It had always been silent, in a way. But now, it felt hollow, empty. Like something precious and alive had been ripped out, and nothing could ever grow back in its place. The twins stopped eating. Arthur tried everything he could think of. Their favorite foods, new colorful plates, letting them pick whatever they wanted from the most expensive menus. But Leo and Noah just stared at their meals, their faces empty, and pushed the plates away. "Where's Emily?" Leo asked every morning, his voice small and confused. Arthur didn't have a good answer for a 6-year-old. Not one that made sense. By the third day, they stopped asking. And that, Arthur realized, was even worse. They stopped talking altogether. They stopped looking at him. They just sat by the window in their wheelchairs, staring out at the quiet street, like they were waiting for someone who wasn't ever coming back. Arthur tried to comfort them, tried to hold them. But when he reached for Leo, his son flinched and pulled away. "You made her leave," Leo whispered, his voice full of pain. And the look in his son's eyes, it wasn't anger. It was something much deeper. Betrayal. Arthur couldn't breathe. He felt a sharp pain in his chest. That night, Mr. Jenkins, his private investigator, called him. "I went through everything, Mr. Hayes. School records, employment history, hospital logs from that night, and it's all verified. She was the lead paramedic on the scene. Her name is on your wife's intake chart at St. Andrews. And the note, we had a handwriting analyst compare it to samples from your wife's old journals." Arthur closed his eyes, bracing himself. "It's a match, sir. Mrs. Hayes wrote that note. Everything Emily told you, Mr. Hayes, it's true." Arthur hung up the phone, still sitting in the dark, empty office. She hadn't lied. Not about any of it. She had sacrificed everything, her career, her life savings, her own deep grief, to keep a promise to a dying woman she hadn't even truly known. And he, Arthur, had sent her away. He had called her a liar. He had accused her of using his sons, all because he was terrified. Because trusting someone meant risking more loss, and Arthur had already lost too much. But now, sitting in this cold, empty house, listening to his sons cry themselves to sleep for the third night in a row, he finally realized something terrible. He hadn't protected them by pushing Emily away. He had broken them. He had made their pain even worse. Arthur walked to the twins' room. He stood in the doorway, watching them. Leo was asleep, his face stained with dried tears, pressed into his pillow. Noah stared at the ceiling, his eyes wide open, unblinking. "Noah!" Arthur whispered. His son didn't respond. He didn't even look at him. And Arthur finally understood. He had become the very thing he feared most,